The wind on Kethra 7 never stopped. It screamed across the frozen plains and threw ice crystals against the station walls like tiny knives. Marcus Chen had learned to ignore it during his 2 years at the fuel processing outpost. He had learned to ignore many things out here at the edge of known space. He worked alone in the exterior maintenance bay, his gloved hands moving across the thermal exchanger panels. The cold bit through his suit despite the heating elements woven into the fabric. His breath came out in white clouds that froze instantly on his face shield. Most species refused postings this far into Dracorian territory. The cold moon orbited a dying star, and the station existed only because the ice sheets contained valuable helium-3 fuel. Marcus did not mind the isolation. He had come here for the silence, for the simple rhythm of work and sleep and work again. No crowds, no politics. Just machines that needed fixing and ice that needed processing. He was adjusting a valve when he noticed movement near the waste heat vents. At first, he thought it was station debris caught in the wind. Then he looked closer. 2 small shapes huddled against the warm metal grating where hot air escaped from the processing plant. They pressed their bodies against the vent, seeking whatever heat they could find. Marcus set down his tools and walked toward them slowly. He did not want to frighten them, whatever they were. As he got closer, his heart dropped into his stomach. They were children. Dracorian children. The Dracorians were a proud species, dragon-like beings with scales that shimmered in 100 colors when healthy. They stood tall and breathed fire, and considered themselves superior to most other races in the galaxy. Marcus had worked alongside adult Dracorians before. They were difficult, arrogant, but capable workers. These two were nothing like the adults he knew. They were small, barely reaching his waist. Their scales should have glowed with inner light, but instead they looked dull and gray, like stones left too long in the rain. They wore thin clothing that would not have kept a human warm on a summer night, let alone on a frozen moon where temperatures dropped to -80. The children stared at him with huge golden eyes. Fear filled those eyes. Fear and something else. Something that looked like the last fading ember of hope. Marcus stopped a few feet away. He did not speak Dracorian, and he doubted they spoke trade common. What could he possibly say anyway? The braver of the two moved first. She was slightly taller than her companion, with darker scales that might have been beautiful purple ones. She reached out one small clawed hand and grabbed the edge of his coat. She did not beg. She did not make a sound. She just held on, her grip tight with desperation. The other child, smaller and lighter in color, pressed close behind her sister. Marcus could see now that they were twins, their features nearly identical despite the different coloring. The smaller one buried her face against her sister's back and trembled. Marcus looked down at that small hand clutching his coat. He thought about the regulations. He thought about the paperwork. He thought about the 1,000 reasons why this was not his problem. Why he should report this to station security and let them handle it. Then he opened his coat. The heating elements in his suit created a pocket of warmth against his body. He guided the children inside, one on each side, and wrapped the heavy fabric around them. They weighed almost nothing. He could feel their small bodies shaking against him. The braver one looked up at him with those huge golden eyes. The fear was still there, but now it mixed with confusion. She did not understand why this strange alien creature was helping them. Marcus did not fully understand either. He just knew that he could not walk away. He turned back to his work panel. He still had 3 hours of repairs left on the thermal exchanges. The children could stay inside his coat until he finished. Then he would figure out what to do next. Working was harder with 2 small bodies pressed against him. His movements became awkward and slow, but he managed. Humans were good at managing, at adapting, at finding ways to do impossible things when the situation demanded it. As he worked, the children slowly stopped shaking, Warmth seeped into their cold bodies. The smaller one fell asleep against his ribs, her breathing soft and even. The braver one stayed awake, watching everything Marcus did with sharp attention. He found himself talking to her even though she could not understand. He explained what each tool did, what each panel controlled. It made the work feel less lonely. An hour passed. Then too, Marcus finished the primary repairs and started on the secondary systems. The child in his coat watched and learned, her golden eyes following his every movement. Then Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. On the children's arms, half hidden beneath their thin sleeves, were marks. Brands burned into their scales in precise patterns. Marcus had seen those patterns before, in news reports and dock warnings and the quiet conversations that workers had when they thought no one was listening. Slave marks. These children belonged to someone. They were property under the laws of this sector, objects to be bought and sold and used however their owner wished. Whoever owned them had branded them like cattle. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, hot and fierce. He forced it down. Anger would not help these children. Only action would help them. He looked toward the sky, where the pale light of the dying star filtered through the clouds. A ship was descending toward the station. It came down fast, its engines burning bright against the gray sky. Someone was coming. Someone who might be looking for two small pieces of lost property. Marcus pulled his coat tighter around the children. The smaller one stirred in her sleep, but did not wake. The braver one looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw that she understood. She knew what that ship meant. He placed one hand gently on her head, a gesture of comfort that crossed all species barriers. He did not know what he was going to do. He did not have a plan. He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not going to give these children back. The ship grew larger in the sky, its shadow falling across the frozen plain. Marcus gathered his tools with one hand while keeping the other wrapped protectively around the twins. Whatever came next, he would face it. He had survived ice storms and equipment failures, and 2 years of crushing loneliness on this frozen rock. He could survive this too. He walked back toward the station entrance, moving carefully so as not to wake the sleeping child. The wind howled around him, throwing ice against his suit. But inside his coat, wrapped in human warmth, 2 small dragon children slept safely, and Marcus Chun, who had come to this moon seeking solitude, found himself carrying the weight of 2 small lives against his heart. Marcus moved through the station corridors with the children still hidden inside his coat. Workers passed him without a second glance. Humans were known for wearing heavy clothing even in heated areas. No one thought it strange. He reached his personal quarters and sealed the door behind him. Only then did he open his coat and let the children step out. The smaller twin woke when her feet touched the floor. She looked around the small room with wide, frightened eyes. Her sister stood in front of her, protective even now, her dull scales rising slightly along her spine. Marcus held up his hands, palms open, a universal gesture of peace. The children watched him, but did not run. His quarters were too cold for them. He could see it in the way they huddled together, in the trembling that returned to their small bodies. Dracorians needed warmth like humans needed air. Their species had evolved on a volcanic world where rivers of fire flowed beneath the ground. Marcus went to his computer terminal and searched for information about Dracorian children. What they ate, what temperatures they needed, how to keep them alive. The answers worried him. Dracorian young required environmental temperatures between 40 and 50 degrees Celsius. Marcus's quarters sat at a comfortable 22 degrees. The station's Dracorian zones ran at 60 degrees, too hot for any human to survive for more than a few minutes. He needed to find a middle ground. His workshop was connected to the main heating conduits. Marcus spent the next hour rerouting pipes and adjusting valves. He created a warm pocket in one corner of the room, raising the temperature to 45 degrees. The heat made sweat pour down his face and his head pound with discomfort. But when he brought the children into that corner, their scales began to regain some of their lost color. Food was the next problem. He had nothing suitable for Dracorian digestion, but the station kitchens held supplies for multiple species. Marcus hacked into the inventory system, something he should not have known how to do, and identified the components he needed. He synthesized a paste that approximated the mineral-rich diet Dracorian. Children required. The braver twin sniffed the paste suspiciously. Then hunger overcame caution. She ate quickly, greedily, and her sister followed. They finished everything Marcus had made and looked at him with silent hope for more. He made 3 more batches. Night fell on Kethra 7, though night here meant only a slightly darker shade of gray. Marcus gave the children blankets and watched them curl together in the warm corner of his workshop. The braver one fell asleep first this time, exhausted from staying alert for so long. The smaller one watched Marcus with unblinking golden eyes, until sleep finally claimed her too. Marcus sat at his workbench and stared at them. He had made a choice. Now he had to live with the consequences. The door chime sounded 3 hours later. Station security stood in the corridor. 2 Vethkin guards with their compound eyes and chitinous armor flanked a Dracorian male in the uniform of a commercial vessel captain. The Vethkin administrator spoke through the guards. This human's quarters must be searched. A recovery team has arrived seeking escaped property. Marcus leaned against his doorframe. Property? The Dracorian captain pushed forward. His scales gleamed healthy red and gold, and his eyes burned with controlled anger. 2 juvenile units escaped from my vessel during a fuel stop. They are valuable breeding stock. I have documentation of ownership. Breeding stock. Marcus felt his stomach turn. I haven't seen any Dracorian children, he said calmly. But you're welcome to search my quarters. He stepped aside and let them in. The security team moved through his small living space efficiently. They opened storage compartments and checked behind furniture. They scanned for heat signatures and biological traces. They found nothing. The Dracorian captain's eyes narrowed. Where's your workshop? Connected to the main facility. You'll need clearance from the station administrator to search it. This was technically true. Marcus had sealed his workshop under a maintenance protocol that required administrative override to access. The Vethkin administrator would give that override eventually, but it would take time. Time Marcus needed. The search team left with promises to return. The captain looked at Marcus for a long moment before following his escorts out. His expression said clearly that he did not believe a word. Marcus had spoken. Marcus sealed his door and waited until their footsteps faded. Then he moved quickly. The children were not in his workshop. He had hidden them somewhere else entirely, somewhere no Dracorian would ever willingly go. The station's cold storage units maintained temperatures of -40 degrees. Death for an unprotected Dracorian. Merely uncomfortable for a human in a proper suit. Marcus had stripped the heating elements from his backup equipment and wrapped the children in layers of thermal fabric. He had created a tiny pocket of survivable warmth inside a frozen tomb. The children had trusted him enough to let him seal them inside. Now he opened the cold storage unit and found them huddled together, alive but terrified. Their scales had gone gray again from the surrounding cold, but the heating elements had kept their core temperatures stable. He lifted them out and carried them back to his workshop through maintenance tunnels too small for Dracorians to navigate. The children clung to him, their small claws digging into his suit. Back in the warm corner, they refused to let go of him. The braver one finally spoke, a single word in broken trade common that she must have learned somewhere in her short, terrible life. Stay? Marcus sat down on the floor, his back against the warm wall, and let the children climb into his lap. They pressed against his chest, seeking the heartbeat they had learned to trust. "Stay," he promised. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the heat and held 2 sleeping children and planned. The slavers would return with proper authorization. They would search everywhere, including places a Dracorian could not go. They would find the children eventually, unless Marcus got them off the station first. He opened his communication tablet and began composing messages. A human cargo pilot who owed him for an engine repair last year. A Vethkin worker who had once confided her disgust at the slave trade after too many drinks. A contact of a contact who ran a sanctuary for rescued children 3 systems away. The replies came slowly through the night. "Yes, I will help. Send coordinates. When do you need the ship?" Marcus looked down at the children sleeping in his arms. The braver one had one hand wrapped around his finger. The smaller one had her face pressed against his heartbeat. 3 days. He needed 3 days. The sun rose on Kethra 7, pale and cold. Marcus heard the slaver ship still docked at the station, waiting. He heard security teams moving through the corridors. Searching Dot, he held the children closer and began calculating how many hiding places he could create in 72 hours. Marcus remembered the first time he learned what the galaxy thought of humans. He had been 20 years old, fresh out of engineering school, taking his first posting on a mixed-species cargo hauler. The Dracorian first officer had looked at him with barely hidden contempt and asked the captain why they needed another average creature on the crew. Average. That word had followed humanity ever since. They joined galactic civilization. Humans were not the strongest. The Goreth could lift 10 times their body weight. Humans were not the smartest. The cerebral collective processed information faster than any organic brain. Humans were not the longest lived. The crystalline beings measured their existence in thousands of years. Humans were just average at everything. Medium strength, medium intelligence, medium lifespan. Nothing special, but over the decades, the galaxy began to notice something strange about these average creatures. Humans did not stop. When a job was hard, humans kept working until it was done. When conditions were dangerous, humans found ways to survive. When rational beings would give up and accept defeat, humans somehow kept going. The Dracorians called it stubbornness. The Vethkin called it inefficiency. The cerebral collective called it a statistical anomaly. Humans called it Tuesday. Marcus thought about this as he moved through the second day of his impossible task. He had not slept in 36 hours. His body ached from work and stress. Any reasonable being would have seen the odds against him and surrendered the children to their legal owners. Marcus just kept working. He had given the twins names in his mind. The braver one he called Bright, for the way her eyes lit up when she learned something new. The smaller one he called Shy, for the way she hid behind her sister whenever a strange sound echoed through the walls. Bright had started. Helping him. Her small claws proved surprisingly useful for delicate work. She watched Marcus repair a heating unit and then copied his movements exactly. When he showed her how to strip wire insulation, she did it faster than he could. She was smart. Both children were smart. They had survived alone on a frozen moon, escaped from a slaver vessel, found the warmth that kept them alive. These were not helpless victims. They were fighters. Marcus respected that. Shy had begun talking too. Single words at first, pulled from some memory of trade common lessons. Then short phrases. Hungry now. Sister sleeping. Warm one fixing. Warm one. That was what they called him. In Dracorian culture, Marcus had learned this was not a casual nickname. It was a term reserved for those who provided safety and comfort. Parents used it for children. Bonded pairs used it for each other. These children had given him a piece of their hearts. The weight of that gift sat heavy on his shoulders. He could not fail them. On the morning of the second day, the other humans on the station began to appear at his workshop door. There were 12 humans on Kethra 7, engineers and technicians and maintenance workers, all doing the jobs that other species considered beneath them. They lived in the cold sections that Dracorians avoided. They worked the dangerous shifts that Vethkin efficiency algorithms deemed too risky. They had heard what Marcus was doing. The first to arrive was Elena, a power systems specialist with gray hair and steady hands. She did not ask questions. She just looked at the children sleeping in the warm corner and said, "What do you need?" After her came Jackson, a young shuttle pilot with more courage than sense. Then the Okonkwo twins, communications experts who could hack any system in the sector. Then Dr. Reyes, the station medic, with supplies for treating Dracorian injuries. Then 7 more, one after another, until all 12 humans on the station stood in Marcus's workshop. "You're all risking your contracts," Marcus said. "If they find out you helped me—" "They came to search my quarters yesterday," Elena interrupted. "Treated me like a criminal because I happened to work near the heating vents. I am done being polite to slavers." Jackson nodded. "My grandfather survived the Titan collapse because strangers pulled him from the rubble. Didn't know him from anyone. Just saw someone who needed help and helped. That's what humans do." The Okonkwo twins exchanged a glance and spoke together, as they often did. "We have a daughter their age. Back on Mars, we would want someone to help her." Marcus looked at these people. These average, unremarkable humans who had come to the edge of space for money or solitude or escape. They were risking everything for children they had never met. Children who were not even their species. This was what the galaxy did not understand about humans. They formed attachments. Quickly, deeply, irrationally. A human could meet a stranger and decide within hours that this stranger was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth dying for. It made no logical sense. It served no evolutionary purpose. It was, by any rational calculation, a weakness. And yet somehow, across 10,000 years of history, it was the thing that kept humanity alive. "The cargo ship arrives tomorrow night," Marcus said. "We need to keep the children hidden until then. The slavers are watching every move I make." "Then we make them watch all of us," Elena said. 12 humans moving in 12 different directions. They can't follow everyone. The plan took shape quickly. Each human would take shifts carrying the children through different parts of the station. They would use maintenance tunnels and service corridors and all the hidden spaces that only workers knew. They would create false trails and false hiding spots and false alarms that would keep the searchers running in circles. It was not a perfect plan. It relied on luck and timing, and the slavers underestimating what average humans could do. But it was the only plan they had. That night, Bright asked Marcus a question that he did not expect. "Why help?" She said in her broken trade common, "We not your kind. We not anything to you." Marcus thought for a long moment before answering. "On my world," he said slowly, "there is an old story. A human found a wounded animal in the snow. The animal was not the human's kind. It could not help the human in return. But the human carried it home anyway and nursed it back to health. When others asked why, the human said, 'Because I could. Because it was cold and I was warm, and sharing warmth costs nothing.'" Bright considered this. Her scales had regained much of their color over the past 2 days. Purple and silver shimmered across her skin in the workshop light. "Your kind is strange," she said finally. Marcus smiled. "Yes, we are." She curled up against his side, her sister already asleep on his other arm. "Good strange," she whispered. "Warm strange. Outside, The slavers searched the station with growing frustration. They did not understand how one human could hide two children so effectively. They did not realize that it was not one human anymore, that it was 12. And 12 average humans, working together, refusing to stop, could accomplish impossible things. The warship arrived on the morning of the third day. Marcus watched it descend through the clouds, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. It dwarfed the slaver ship that had been hunting them. It dwarfed the entire station. Lord Kethros had come personally. The Dracorian noble was ancient by his species standards. His scales darkened to deep crimson with age. He walked through the station corridors like he owned every inch of the facility. In a sense, he did. His trading company held the contracts that kept Kethra 7 running. He summoned Marcus to the station's administrative center. The room was too warm for human comfort, heated to Dracorian preferences. Marcus sweated through his shirt as he stood before the noble's chair. Lord Kethros looked down at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "You are the human who has been hiding my property," Lord Kethros said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I don't know what you're talking about." Lord Kethros smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Please, do not insult us both with lies. My agents have tracked every move you have made for the past 3 days. You are clever for a human, but cleverness has limits." He leaned forward. "I am prepared to be generous. Return the breeding units to me, and I will forget this insult. I will even pay you for your trouble. Consider it compensation for the inconvenience. And if I refuse, then I will be less generous." Lord Kethros gestured toward the window, where his warship hung in the sky like a promise of violence. "There are 12 humans on this station. Accidents happen in facilities like this. Equipment failures, pressure breaches. Tragic, but not uncommon." Marcus felt cold despite the heat. "You would murder innocent people over 2 children? They are not children. They are property. My property. And I would do far worse than murder to reclaim what belongs to me." Lord Kethros settled back in his chair. "You have 1 hour to decide." Marcus walked out of the administrative center with his mind racing. 1 hour. The cargo ship was still 12 hours away. He had no way to contact it faster, no way to speed its arrival. He returned to his workshop, where the other humans waited. They had heard about the warship. They had seen the weapons pointed at their home. Fear showed on their faces, but none of them had run. "He's going to kill us," Jackson said. "He's going to kill all of us, and there's nothing we can do about it." "We can surrender the children," Dr. Reyes said quietly. "It would save our lives." The room fell silent. Everyone looked at Marcus Dodd. He thought about Bright's hand wrapped around his finger. He thought about Shy's face pressed against his heartbeat. He thought about the word they used for him, warm one, and everything it meant. "No," he said. Elena nodded slowly. "Then we need another plan." The plan they created was desperate and probably foolish, but it was the only option that did not involve giving 2 children back to a monster. Marcus returned to the administrative center alone. He walked past the guards and stood before Lord Kethros with his shoulders straight and his voice steady. "I challenge you," he said, "under Article 7 of the Galactic Trade Authority Founding Charter, Section 12, Paragraph 4, the clause regarding salvage rights and disputed property." Lord Kethros stared at him. For the first time, surprise flickered across those ancient features. "You know the old laws. I know enough." Marcus had spent the entire night studying, searching for any legal weapon he could use. The children were found outside Dracorian jurisdiction, in territory controlled by no recognized government. I found them abandoned and took them into my care. Under the salvage clause, that creates a legitimate property dispute. They were not abandoned. They escaped. Prove it. Marcus met the noble's gaze without flinching. Bring your evidence before a trade authority tribunal. Let them decide who has the rightful claim. Lord Kethros could refuse. He could ignore the old laws and take what he wanted by force. But Marcus was gambling on something he had observed about Dracorian nobility. They valued tradition. They valued the appearance of honor. Killing humans in anger was one thing. Openly defying the founding laws of galactic trade was another. The silence stretched for a long moment. Very well, Lord Kethros finally said. We will have our tribunal at the nearest trade authority station. 3 days from now. 3 days. The cargo ship would arrive in 12 hours. Marcus nodded and walked out of the room before his legs could give way beneath him. The next 12 hours were the longest of his life. The humans kept moving, kept creating distractions, kept the children one step ahead of the searchers. Lord Kethros had agreed to the tribunal, but his agents had not stopped looking. They knew something was wrong. They could feel the desperation in the air. At midnight, Jackson's communication device buzzed. The cargo ship had entered the system. The extraction had to happen quickly. Marcus could not risk taking the children to the main docking bay, where guards watched every arrival. Instead, the cargo pilot agreed to land on the ice plains outside the station, in a maintenance zone that humans serviced, but Dracorians avoided. Marcus carried the children through the final stretch of maintenance tunnels. Bright walked beside him now, too big to carry, but still holding his hand. Shy rode on his back, her arms wrapped around his neck. They emerged into the freezing wind. The cargo ship waited 200 meters away, its hatch open and its engines running. Behind them, alarms began to sound. Lord Kethros had discovered the escape. Marcus ran. The cold cut through his clothes and stole the breath from his lungs. Bright stumbled, and he scooped her up without breaking stride. 2 children in his arms. 200 meters of frozen ground between him and freedom. The warship's searchlights swept across the ice. Marcus heard the thunder of shuttle engines lifting off from the station, 100 meters. His legs burned. His lungs screamed for air. 50 meters. Bright buried her face against his chest. Shy whimpered on his back. 20 meters. The cargo ship's pilot waved frantically from the hatch. Marcus threw himself through the opening and collapsed on the deck. The hatch sealed behind him. The ship lurched into the sky. Through the viewport, he watched the station shrink below them. Lord Kethros's shuttles gave chase, but the cargo ship had a head start and a pilot who knew every shortcut in the sector. They crossed into neutral space just ahead of weapons range. The warship could not follow without creating a diplomatic incident. That would cost Lord Kethros more than 2 escaped slaves were worth. Marcus watched it break hard at the border, hanging in space like a predator denied its prey. They were safe. Marcus sat on the deck of the cargo ship with 2 Dracorian children in his lap. His hands were shaking. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had just made an enemy of one of the most powerful nobles in Dracorian space. He could never go back. His career was over. His life as he knew it had ended. Bright looked up at him with those huge golden eyes. Warm ones saved us, she said. Marcus pulled both children close and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for 3 days. Yeah, he said. I guess I did. The sanctuary sat on a green moon orbiting a gentle yellow star. Rivers of warm water flowed through valleys covered in soft purple grass. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks hidden by clouds that never brought cold rain. Marcus had been here for 6 months. He worked in the maintenance building, fixing the heating systems and power generators and all the machines that kept the sanctuary running. It was good work. Simple work. The kind of work that let his hands stay busy while his mind wandered. The sanctuary housed over 200 children from a dozen different species. Some had escaped from slave ships. Some had been abandoned by parents who could not care for them. Some had been rescued by people like Marcus, who saw suffering and refused to look away. Kiravash, the old Dracorian warrior who ran the sanctuary, asked no questions about where the children came from. She only cared that they were safe now. Bright had become Marcus's unofficial apprentice. She followed him to work every morning, her scales now vibrant purple and silver, her eyes bright with health and curiosity. She learned faster than any student he had ever taught. Within 3 months, she could repair basic systems without supervision. Within 5 months, she was designing improvements that Marcus had never considered. "You have a gift," he told her one evening as they walked back from the workshop. "You taught me," she said. "I showed you how to use tools. The rest came from you." She smiled, a Dracorian expression that showed teeth but meant happiness. Warm one is too modest. Shy had found her own path. She spent her days in the sanctuary school, learning trade common and mathematics and history. She still did not talk much, but when she did talk, people listened. She had a quiet wisdom that seemed impossible in someone so young. She had also started teaching the younger children. Refugees who arrived frightened and confused found comfort in Shy's gentle presence. She would sit with them and hold their hands and wait patiently until the fear faded from their eyes. "She will be a healer someday," Kiravash told Marcus. "Or a leader. Someone who brings peace to broken things." Marcus watched Shy guide a newly arrived child toward the dining hall. The child, a small Vethkin with damaged antennae, held Shy's hand like it was the only safe thing in the universe. "She already is," he said. Word had spread through the galaxy about what happened on Kethra 7. The story changed with each telling, growing larger and stranger. Some versions said Marcus had fought off an army of slavers single-handed. Some versions said he had stolen a warship and destroyed Lord Kethrus's fleet. Some versions said he was not one human but 100, a secret army hidden among the workers of the outer stations. The truth was simpler and more powerful. One human had found 2 children in the cold. He had not asked permission to help them. He had not calculated the risks and rewards. He had simply opened his coat and shared his warmth. And that simple act of kindness had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. On Kethra 7, the 11 humans who had helped Marcus became heroes to the station's workers. They formed a network, passing information about slaver ships and endangered children to sanctuaries across the sector. Lord Kethrus tried to punish them, but they were protected now by attention. Too many eyes watched what happened on that frozen moon. In the trafficking networks, word spread differently. Whispers of warning passed from ship to ship. Be careful with humans. They form attachments that defy reason. They will sacrifice everything for creatures they barely know. They do not understand when they have lost. Lord Kethrus himself had learned this lesson. His pursuit of 2 escaped children had cost him political standing, trade contracts, and the respect of fellow nobles who considered his behavior excessive. He had gained nothing and lost much, all because one human refused to give up. Marcus thought about this sometimes, in the quiet evenings when his work was done. He thought about the choice he had made on that frozen maintenance bay, the choice to open his coat and let 2 strangers in. He had not felt brave in that moment. He had not felt noble or heroic. He had only felt a simple truth that needed no justification. These children were cold, and he was warm, and sharing warmth cost nothing. The galaxy did not understand humans. It measured them by strength and speed and intelligence and found them average. It did not understand that human power lay elsewhere, in places that could not be measured. Humans carried warmth with them wherever they went. Not just physical heat, but something deeper. A willingness to extend protection to strangers. A stubbornness that refused to accept that some lives mattered less than others. A capacity for attachment to turn brief encounters into unbreakable bonds. This was the fire that burned in human hearts. Not the bright flame that consumed, but the steady warmth that sustained. It could not conquer armies or build empires, but it could change the universe one small kindness at a time. On a warm evening, 6 months after his escape from Kethra 7, Marcus sat in the sanctuary garden and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Bright sat beside him, working on a small device she was building. Shy sat on his other side, reading a book in Trade Common, her lips moving silently as she practiced the difficult words. A commotion at the sanctuary gates drew his attention. A new group of refugees had arrived. Different species, different circumstances, but the same desperate need. Kiravash moved among them, offering food and water and gentle words of welcome. Marcus watched the new arrivals file past. Most were adults, but among them walked a small figure. A child of some species he did not recognize, with large dark eyes and trembling limbs in fear radiating from every movement. The child saw Marcus sitting in the garden, saw the warmth of the sunset on his face, the 2 dragon children beside him, the peace of the sanctuary around him. The child walked toward him slowly. Marcus did not move. He waited. The small hand reached out and grabbed the edge of his coat. Not begging, just holding on. A silent plea for safety in a universe that had offered none. Marcus opened his coat. The child crawled inside, pressing against his warmth. Bright and Shy shifted to make room without being asked. They understood. They remembered. Marcus wrapped his arms around all 3 children and looked up at the sunset. The galaxy was vast and cold, full of beings who measured worth in power and profit. It was a hard place for small creatures, for the weak and the lost and the ones who had no one to protect them. But there were also humans, and humans would keep opening their coats, keep sharing their warmth, keep fighting for strangers they had only just met. They would do this not because it was logical, not because it served some greater purpose, but simply because they could. Because it was cold and they were warm, and sharing warmth cost nothing. The sunset faded into stars. The children slept against his chest. Somewhere in the sanctuary, other humans worked and laughed and built shelter for those who needed it. And Marcus Chun, who had come to the edge of space seeking solitude, held 3 small lives in his arms and understood that he had found something far more valuable. He had found what humans were meant to do. He had found warmth worth sharing, and he would share it for as long as he lived.